All right. Welcome. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Zonta Club of Santa Clarita Valley's Life Forward Workshop, Cyberbullying with Chris Jones. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for this workshop this morning. I am Beth Heiserman, Vice President of the Zonta Club of the Santa Clarita Valley. I would like to introduce our club's president, Nicole Miller. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the chat. Please send any questions to the submit questions here in the chat box. To make all of our guests comfortable today while we're recording this workshop, we have privacy settings. Feel free to click on the stop video to disable your camera. This presentation will be recorded live on Facebook and will be uploaded and available to view on our website. Please feel welcome to share this with your friends and family. We are requesting that everyone remain muted. It will only record the host. Please feel free to share this presentation with your friends and family. And please visit our past workshops on our website, scvzonta.org. And now I present Phyllis Walker, Chair of our Life Forward Committee.
Welcome everyone to this very important and timely Life Forward workshop, Cyberbullying Our Youth. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker, Chris Jones. Chris is a licensed educational psychologist and nationally certified school psychologist. He is co-founder of Dynamics Interventions, the first incorporation of licensed educational psychologists in the history of California. Chris is also a school psychologist for iLead California, servicing Santa Clarita Valley International Charter School. He is co-author of Project Friendship, a research-based anti-bully program that has been implemented in 5 school districts throughout Southern California. Chris is an active member of the California Association of School Psychologists and the National Association of School Psychologists. He currently sits on the board of directors for the California Association of School Psychologists as the LEP, or Licensed Educational Specialist, and Secretary Treasurer. He also sits on the board of Behavioral Sciences as the LEP member. Now, Chris, the stage is yours to share your expertise and help us all learn about the impact of cyberbullying on our youth.
Thank you so much, Phyllis. Very happy to be here this morning. As you guys heard, please feel free to drop questions in the chat as we go along. Still getting used to doing these presentations on Zoom. I'm much better in person, so forgive me if I get glitchy. All right, so let me start share. Okay, all right. So this morning we're going to talk about cyberbullying. This is a very hot topic, especially now as we've been forced to spend much more of our lives on the computer than we probably would like to. So, we're going to kind of break down the different parts of what cyberbullying is, and then talk about really what you guys can do as parents to help your kids. So bullying is a very broad term, and I think that it often gets overused. So we want to talk about what bullying actually is. Bullying is really, it's aggressive behavior that involves unwanted negative actions towards other people. It involves a pattern of behavior that's repeated over time. So this is a really important point. Bullying is a pattern of behavior. It's not an isolated incident. There's kids that are mean. There's kids that don't do nice things. But when we talk about what bullying is, it is something that happens over and over and over again. And the purpose of bullying is to create an imbalance of power or strength between the bully and the target of the person that's being targeted from bullying. There are 4 different types of bullying that we have identified. Verbal bullying, which includes name calling, teasing, those sort of things. Then there's social relational bullying, which is isolation, spreading rumors, typically, using your social status to keep other people below you. There's physical bullying, which is, kicking, hitting, punching, those sort of things. And then what we're going to focus on today, cyberbullying. This is typically social or relational bullying that occurs over electronic devices, phones, computers, tablets, anything that is going to connect people, social media, things like that. So what we've learned through the research is that typically males will involve themselves in verbal and physical bullying. Females will typically involve in social, relational, and verbal bullying. But everybody equally does cyberbullying. So it becomes a more of a broad thing because kids have access. Kids have the means and the ability to understand how the technology works, and they look for different ways to to use that to their advantage. So really, what is a bully? We have two types of people that that become bullies. Those who start off being socially marginalized. So they may have been bullied themselves. They may lack social skills. They're more likely to engage in physical forms of bullying. They can use that behavior to deflect harassment away from themselves and to gain social power. So socially marginalized people are those that typically started out as targets of bullying themselves, and they're trying to balance the equation by by overshooting and becoming bullies themselves. Then we have those that enjoy high social status. So they may engage in the behavior as a way to protect their status, to defend against others who challenge their social power. We look at kids and kind of what they do and how they act in groups is that they like to be the alpha. They want to be the top person, and in order to do that, you sometimes have to stop people from taking over your reign, if you will. And as a result, they create a hierarchy, and they want to stay on top of that hierarchy. So this is one of the reasons that that they'll engage in bullying behavior. Oftentimes, the people who enjoy social status have very strong social skills. They're very aware of how people act, interact, and think and feel, and all of those things. They may be leaders in school. They're more likely to bully through social aggression, rumors, gossip, ostracizing people, defamation of character. So this is typically the type of bullying the type of bullies that do really well in the cyber world, because it's about control. And again, just to reiterate that, bullying is about control. It's about creating an imbalance of power to allow somebody to remain above someone, and for whatever reason they feel like that is how they are going to survive and make it through their day. So we have some statistics. I like to throw statistics out because I'm kind of a nerdy psychologist and I like the numbers. So the numbers though are interesting because we don't have any current research not that we're post-pandemic, but as we're in the pandemic. So the most recent research comes from 2019, and depending on where you look, the numbers can be very different. So the consensus seems to be about 16% of high school students were targets of bullying in 2019. If you look at different research, that number goes all the way up to like 50 or 60%. So I tend to be more on the conservative side when I'm trying to decipher statistics. I've seen a couple of different studies that say about 16%. And then a couple that have said, fewer that have said that it's a higher number. But the percentage of the individuals impacted by cyberbullying has doubled in the last 10 years. And that, in my opinion, simply is due to access. The more kids have access to technology. I remember when we first started doing our Project Friendship presentations in schools. Every year, first it was just the junior high kids that had cell phones. Then every year it seemed to get, the kids got younger and younger. Sixth graders, fifth graders, fourth graders, third graders had cell phones. And then there was the burst of, I'm aging myself because this was like 10 years ago when I started to see this trend. And then there was the emergence of social media, from Facebook to Twitter to Snapchat, to Instagram, all of these things. TikTok used to be called Musical.ly. All of these different ways of kids engaging with one another, through social media. And because lots of parents are old, we don't know how the technology stuff works. So it's a way for kids, a new way for kids to kind of hide things from parents, to engage in try to engage in independent behavior. But unfortunately, when there's not a whole lot of parameters and it's not obvious because it's done over the internet, sometimes it goes unseen by parents. So we need to help ourselves to become more informed, and become better with the technology so that we can support our kids. So one statistic that I find really interesting is that more than half the kids have not told their parents about something mean or hurtful happening to them online. The biggest reason why, when I talk to kids, why haven't you told anybody? Because they don't want to lose their phones. They don't want to lose their computers. They don't want to lose their access to their world. We live in a society where the phones, the tablets, the computers, all of that creates access, not just to fun things, but to people, videos, games, all of these things. And so, kids will hide that information from parents for fear that those things will get taken away, which is one of the reasons why we talk, and I'll talk a little bit later about creating, open communication with your kids to make sure that, they understand that there needs to be parameters to things, but when there's problems, they have to be discussed and talked about. Okay, so with regards to cyberbullying, what kids need to know, this is stuff that parents should be teaching their kids as they're moving through their world. Never give out personal information over the internet, on any social media platforms. A lot of kids will sometimes take pictures of themselves that have things in the background that can tell people where you live, like a street sign, or they're in front of their house and there's an address there, or different types of landmarks that will identify kind of where they're at. So we want to be really careful about doing those things. Your name, your gender, your age, all of those things become information that people can use to manipulate. So we want to make sure that we don't ever give out personal information over the internet, especially if it's in a wide social media format. Don't ever give out passwords, not even, except to your parents, of course, but not even to friends. So one of the things that, and I've got a couple of kids at home. They're a little bit older now. They're 19 and 17. But I remember a couple of years ago, as my daughter was moving from junior high to high school, something that was really, really important to her was what was called a streak. I'm like, what, Kate, what's a streak? A streak was something where, and I can't remember what, I think it was Snapchat or something like that, where they would need to send a message to a person every single day to keep the streak alive. And so if somebody knew that they weren't going to be able to send a message or a snap or whatever on a certain day, they would often give their password. My daughter was guilty of doing this, would give her password to a friend so that that friend could send the message and the streak could continue. It was really, really important for them to do that. And I remember her telling me this as I'm driving her to school. I almost pulled the car over and said, "You can't do that, kid. That is not a safe thing to do." Because although this person may be a really good friend today, tomorrow that could change and be different. So we need to make sure that we're not giving passwords out to anybody other than parents. So kids also need to know that if someone sends something that's mean or threatening as a message, never respond to it. Save it and show it to an adult. Not even like, like a okay or anything. If that message is sent, it doesn't always mean that it's been received. So, one thing that kids talk about today is being left on read, which is an indication that the person who sent the message, that message has not been read or delivered or opened by the other person it was intended to go to. So if that's possible, don't open it, don't do anything like that, but save it and show it to somebody, because that becomes evidence. And the reality is that cyberbullying is illegal. It is a form of assault. And it is really important for kids to understand that this is an unacceptable activity that has consequences. So in order for consequences to move forward, we have to have evidence of the act. So that's why it's really important to save it and to show it to someone. Never ever open emails or messages from people that you don't know or for somebody that you know is a bully. Never click on links in messages from known or unknown people until they can be verified. So this is sometimes what is called phishing with a PH, I-S-H-I-N-G. Cyber bullies will often find ways to hack into other people's accounts, and they often do this through phishing. Hey, reply to this message or open this link. And when that happens, that can allow somebody to gain access to the account that they're trying to phish. So whether that be email or social media account or text message, something like that. So it's really important that kids don't open, click, unless they absolutely know what's going on. I'll give you just a quick, this just happened the other day to me. I had a friend, a really good friend, like someone I absolutely trust, that sent me a link to a TikTok video. And at first I was gonna click on it, but then I'm like, he never just sends stuff to me. It's usually to our group of friends that we have in our text thread. So I sent him a message. I said, "Hey, did you send me this link? Or is this something that, because," and he ended up, he's like, "Yeah, I sent it to you. I thought it was really funny. I just wanted you to check it out." So I'm like, oh, "Okay." So then I felt like I was in a good enough, safe enough position to open it without compromising, my own phone or things like that. Another example is that, as Phyllis said, I sit on the board of directors for the California Association of School Psychologists. And this isn't necessarily bullying, it's more hacking, which is part of like cyber targeting, which is a whole different topic. But I'll get emails from our president that are personal. They'll say, "Chris, can you do me this favor?" and reply to the email because I need something done, and it'll be signed by the president and her name will be on there. And when I go up and look at the link or at the email address, the return address isn't her, it's somebody else. And so I'm like, oh, okay. So she's been some account has been compromised, or there's been a way for somebody to be able to connect that the two of us know one another and are trying to get me to to click on a link or reply to an email. So that just gets sent to spam. Kids, don't ever put anything online that you wouldn't want your classmates to see. Once information is online, it's almost impossible to delete it. I'll have kids say, "Oh, I put a picture up, but then I took it down because I didn't want others to see it." Well, once it's been posted and someone has seen it, they can take a screenshot of it, and then it exists forever. So it is really, really difficult, even if a message is deleted or a picture is deleted from your account, it doesn't mean that it wasn't picked up or saved on somebody else's account. So, and I'm going to age myself here. When I was a kid and I would, do normal dumb kid stuff, my mom would say, "Hey, would you say that or do that in front of your grandmother?" Oh no, of course not. Well, then if that's the case, then don't do it. That was a good line in the sand for me. So something that you can talk to your kids about if they wouldn't want other classmates to see it, or parents or grandparents, people that they respect, to see what they're posting, then don't post it. It's just it's a conservative, safe way to go. And then don't text when you're angry. Don't send messages when you're not in a good mood. Before hitting that send button, ask yourself how you would feel if you'd received that kind of message. There's, especially in the pandemic, we've seen significant increases in anxiety and depression from both kids and adults. Most of us are not wired to sit in front of a computer and socialize. Most of us want to be in person. So when we're isolated, we don't know what to do with ourselves, we get feelings of anxiety and depression. That tends to increase emotionality. And when we become emotional, we make sometimes poor decisions. So when you are angry about something or hurt or feeling anxious or sad, and you're thinking about putting something out there online as a response to someone, or you're firing back at somebody, make sure that you breathe first. Take a breath, back yourself up, look at it again and say, do I really want to put this out there? Because there's some things you just can't undo, right? There's some things that you can't change once they've been done. And so we want to make sure that you guys are making really good decisions about what you're putting out there online. Also, help kids who are bullied online by not joining in and showing bullying messages to an adult. So when we talk about bullying, there's different ways to combat it. In our program Project Friendship, we had 7 or 8 different rules that we would try to teach kids to follow in order to combat bullying so that they could stand up to it. One of them is telling the bully to stop. Another is ignoring it. A lot of bullies, like we talked about, those that are trying to gain high social status, they want a crowd, they want an audience, they want attention. And so if somebody puts something mean or hurtful online and everybody reacts to it, laughs about it, makes comments, even tells them they're being mean, that is still attention. Attention can be positive or negative. So one of the things that we try to teach kids is to ignore it. An analogy that I give is, can you imagine what would happen? And easy example, we've all been there. We've told jokes that have bombed. We said a joke, we thought it was really funny, and nobody laughs, and you get crickets. And then you feel really silly, and you're like, oh, so you went from being, I'm really funny, to, yeah, I'm really embarrassed, and that was horrible. Another example I give kids is imagine if if there was a concert happening, big concert at Hollywood Bowl or Greek Theater, Staples, wherever, and the band walks out to start the show and nobody's there. Nobody. It would be like, what am I doing this for? And they would feel really bad. So if we're able to ignore and not give attention to mean things that are said online, then theoretically that bullying should, at least if it doesn't stop, it'll diminish, which is really important. And if you see those messages, show them to an adult. Let people know what's happening so that there can be intervention. Sometimes kids have great intention, but they don't always know how to solve the problem. So it's important to get the support of a trusted adult who might know how to solve the problem, so that we can stop the cycle and the culture that has been developed. And then, be as polite online as you are in person. So, it's really, and you see it all the time, simply be nice. If you can find a way to be nice, a lot of these problems take care of themselves. If we don't engage, if we ignore it, if we show support for the people that have been bullied, if we, work as a community to say this behavior is not acceptable and we need to do things differently, then we can have change. Another thing that we talk about with bullying is, bullying is targeted behavior. A bully picks their target for a reason. Typically, it's because they feel like they can gain power or control over that person, or like we said earlier, to gain social status and all of those things. There are way, way more people who are not bullies than those that are. So one person is the bully, and that person controls the crowd. If the crowd decides that they don't want that control, they don't like the way things are going, all they need to do is turn around, work together, and say stop. Because one person may have control over a group until the group decides that they don't want that person in control anymore. One of the things that I talk about a lot with kids is that control is an illusion. It's something that we think that we have because we've got things moving in the right direction. But it's fragile and it can change depending on the foundation and the supports and all those things. So, we need to be really, really careful about how we act online, because it can create a lot of illusions of control of how we are, trying to manipulate or change people or get them to act a certain way, which turns into bullying. Sometimes people have great intentions when they start things online and they get a lot of attention for it. And then all of a sudden they think they have a ton of power. And then that power, perceived power, goes to their head. And next thing they know, they're engaged in cyberbullying. It may be unintentional because they want to maintain the power and control that they feel that they've got. So we need to really, really kind of, do self-checks along the way. All right. So the next part I want to kind of talk about has to do with parenting. How do we parent this generation of kids that have access to technology and that we as adults don't understand? This is no different than when us as adults were kids. I remember in, I don't know, 5th or 6th grade, coming home, and there was this magical box on the television set. And if you put a tape into it, it would play movies. It was called a VCR. My dad bought it, and he had no idea how to work it. I had no idea how to work it either, but I figured it out real quick because as kids, your brains are a little bit more flexible. I didn't have all of the things I'd learned. I was able to figure it out real quick. My dad, it took forever. So there's always a gap between the generations. And kids are much more adaptable than adults because they, like I said before, they haven't learned to be rigid. They're born in flexibility. Things are constantly changing and moving and evolving. We're at a point as adults where we want the evolution to stop, and we just like things the way they are. And in order to learn new things, it's quite it can be quite taxing. So as adults now, we have to look at our kids and the things that they're going through and understand where they're coming from in order to help them move forward. So ways that you can do that is understanding, and we have to remember what it was like when we were kids, especially teenagers. Their main goal is to become independent. They want to do things on their own. They want to be responsible for their own stuff. And they don't want parents over their shoulder every 5 minutes. So if we know that they are striving to become independent, actualized humans, then from a parental perspective, it gives us a place to go to help them obtain that, because that's our ultimate goal. We want all of our kids to be more successful than us. We want them to be happy. We want them to be, living the best lives that they can live. So we have to foster that and allowing them to gain that independence, but still kind of watch and create boundaries and limits. I've talked about this in many different workshops that I've done, but one of the most fascinating studies I ever read, this was back in college, so it was, last century. There was a study that was done with small kids, 3 or 4, 5, maybe 6-year-old. And we had 2 groups. And this was about independent play. One group was allowed to play in a playground that had a fence around it. The other group played in the playground without a fence. And what the researchers observed was that the kids who played in the playground that didn't have a fence tended to congregate together towards the middle of the playground. They didn't really move around a whole lot. They kind of stayed more in one spot. The kids that played in the playground that had the fence moved all the way up to the fence, all around. They played more independently. And the researchers felt that the kids, the fence represented a boundary. Kids knew exactly how far they could go and still maintain safety. So it gave them the freedom to explore. It reduced anxiety and the confidence that they needed in order to live within that boundary. Without the fence, the theory was that it created anxiety because kids didn't know exactly what they could and could not do, where they could and could not go. So that study has sat with me for the majority of my career. And, both as a professional and as a parent, understanding that we have to give our kids reasonable limits and boundaries and allow them to live within those boundaries and work within those boundaries and allow them to make mistakes and all those things, but understand that there's a line in the sand that they can't cross. And if they do, then we have to step in as parents and take care of whatever it is we need to take care of. So kids, even though they fight the limits, they fight the curfews, they fight all the I can only have my computer for 4 hours today, no screen time after dinner. They fight it, but in the end, they not only need it, they want it. They won't tell you that, but they really do. And it's really important for them, to have those boundaries in order to become actualized humans. It's important to maintain open communication. And like I said, I have 2 teenagers in the house, and they don't really communicate very well with me, or a little bit better with my wife. But maintaining that open communication and creating an environment that is safe for kids to talk, understanding that they're not going to get in trouble for sharing things with you, but instead using you as a resource, a sounding board, and being reasonable is really important. So even though they may not want to communicate, we have to push the communication. So it's hard as a parent when you're trying to talk to your kids and then, you know, they're not wanting to talk to you. So we feel, as parents, we feel rejected. We feel, excuse me, we feel like, you know, they don't want to talk to me. I'm intruding, but we have to kind of push through those feelings that we get as parents and keep the communication lines open. Keep asking the questions, keep butting in, keep that communication happening. Even though they may fight it, at the end, it's really important because they'll know that when there's a problem, they can come to you. And in a personal example, I tend to throw my own parenting personal examples in this. Like I said, my son is 19, and he's trying to figure his world out. And maybe a month or so ago, he got in a little bit of trouble. And I'll never forget, I was in the kitchen making breakfast, getting ready for work, and he comes downstairs and he's white as a ghost. And he goes, "Dad." I said, "Yeah." He was, "Remember how we've talked about that we need to have more open communication?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, I kind of did this thing and I'm in trouble." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And as he told me what happened, in my parenting mind, I was fuming. I'm like, "Knucklehead, what are you doing?" But then took a breath and I just listened. And I said, "Okay, all right, well, here's the problem. And what can I do to support you to solve that problem?" And it worked. I was shocked because usually those things, I talk about them in workshops all the time, but then I'm like, "Oh, okay, I actually I'm practicing what I'm preaching." He was able to figure his stuff out. There was, he had to deal with the consequences of the problem. I didn't save him from it, but I supported him through it and let him deal with what had happened. And then he came out better on the other side. It took a long time to get there. He's 19. So, I can't say that every problem has been that way, but he knew at the end of the day that I was going to be supportive of him because that is what my wife and I have been trying to establish with our kids since day one. So you gotta, what do they say? You gotta break a bunch of eggs before you make a good omelet. There's lots of mistakes that happen as parents and so many different things. Times I'd like to go back and say, I wish I could have done that differently. But then at the end of the day, when things start working, then you're like, okay, all that hard work paid off. So it's a good thing to do. Parenting is the hardest job. It's way harder than being a psychologist. It's really, really hard. I tell people that I became a much better psychologist after I became a parent because I went, oh, I get it now. I know why parents are crazy because kids. So, it's important to try to maintain that balance in that communication. Setting reasonable limits is really important. A lot of kids are like, oh, all my other friends, parents let them do all these things. Like, yeah, I'm sure everybody is, except you, is running around free and they can stay out as long as they want and do whatever they want. But setting reasonable limits with kids is important. If you hold the reins too tight, then it's not giving them the space that they need in order to kind of learn and grow. If you set no boundaries, then they don't know where they can and can't go, and they oftentimes will make mistakes that they can't undo. Like I said, as my kids are getting older, I'm like, calculated risks, my friend. Like, do things, like if you're going to make a decision, make sure you can come back out from it. There's some things you can't come back from. Like, never get in a car after you've been drinking, like that, or with someone who has been drinking. I go, you can't come back from that. That's not something, if you decide to drink at a party and you're underage, then you call mom and dad. You can come back from that. You're going to get in trouble because that's not okay to do, but you're going to be safe and you're not going to hurt anybody else. So making sure that kids understand where the limits are. Be an informed consumer. If you've got kids online, know what they're doing, know where the things that the apps that they're using, the different social media things that they're they're involved in. Even if you're not, like, I have Snapchat on my phone, but I don't know how it works. So I had to have my kids sit down and show me, and I still don't know how it works, but I know that I can follow them. At least I try to follow them. You know, we have to keep ourselves constantly being educated as the world evolves and changes around us. Instill your family values. You know, what's important. You know, family values are super important. You know, be a living example to your kids. If your family is, you know, really, if things are really important to your family, make sure that your kids see that in you, that you're living examples of it, and that when they leave the house or when they get online, that they are representing your family, and making sure that they understand that, so that they are acting appropriately, you know, both online and in person. Model appropriate behavior. You know, if you're online bashing people on Facebook, if you are creating an environment where, you know, you are gossiping and you are spreading rumors and you're acting like, you know, a bully online, then you can't expect your kids not to do that, because that's the example that you're setting. So model the appropriate behavior, and that way they will have a foundation to move forward from. And then create an environment of trust. That's really important. You know, trust is something that is hard to earn, easy to lose, but if you have it, it's really a good thing. So that doesn't mean, when I say an environment of trust, that kids will know that they're not going to get in trouble for stuff. They need to know that there's limits and boundaries to, you know, to your parenting and your family values. But they also need to know that the family, the home environment is a safe place. A safe place meaning that, you know, they may get in trouble, but it's going to be a short-term consequence. That at the end of the day, that you love them, you care about them, and you want them to be successful. So knowing that they can come to you when there's a problem without getting, you know, everything taken away forever, will increase the chances that they're going to talk to you more about things. Okay, so as kids are looking for independence, how do we help them do that? Maintain open communication in an environment of trust, like we just talked about. Be an administrator on your kids' social media accounts. So know where they are and what they're doing. And I'm not, my kids will be like, Dad, you're not stalking me online. I'm like, I'm going to stalk you online a little bit. I need to see kind of what is happening. Follow your kids and their friends on social media. You know, this may not work for everybody. And a lot of times kids on social media, they have a bunch of friends that they don't actually know. I know that, like, specifically, like, my son wants to be a filmmaker. And so one of the things he did was, when he was in, I don't know, junior high, early high school, created a YouTube channel, and would make videos and put his content up on YouTube. In order for him to become more successful, he needed to have people follow and like his stuff. Well, a lot of times online, people will do that, will reciprocate that. They'll reach out and go, hey, I'll follow you if you follow me. He doesn't know who they are, but it allows for greater exposure, and people will share his content, and that way he gets more exposure to things. You know, that's just kind of how the world works these days. So it's impossible, obviously, to follow everybody that your kids are online with, but go through their list with them and see who they actually know and who they don't know. And how many of the kids that they actually know do you know, right? Like, how are you aware of who they are, and you know, and those sort of things. So just to kind of keep an overarching umbrella of safety so that you know kind of where your kids are at. Talk about the benefits and the dangers of social media and the internet. You know, all the good and the bad. I mean, it's not all dangerous out there on the internet. There's a lot of really good stuff, a lot of really good content, and you know, but kids need to be aware of, you know, the dangers of the things that happen when they are online. What could happen? You know, especially when you're looking at, you know, people who are phishing or possible predators. That's not bullying. That's a whole different. That's just internet safety. But understanding that there are, you know, that not everybody out there is you know, an honest, open person. So making sure that they're aware of all of those things. And then one of the biggest things, if they are a target of cyberbullying, um, or if they're being a bully themselves, watch for changes in their diet, their friends, their grades, their clothes, how they're dressing. You know, it's like I said, it's tough these days with the pandemic, because our world has been turned upside down. But and so we're seeing, like I said, a huge increase in anxiety and depression. And when we're distance learning, and now that we're back, you know, it's a little bit better. But you know, as we're going through this new wave of, you know, COVID with the Omicron, and you know, our numbers are going back up, people are starting to withdraw again. So your kids' behavior will tell you if something's wrong. So, you know, they'll become more quiet, they'll stop eating, or they'll overeat. Their friends may change. You'll see a drop in their grades, or all of a sudden they start, you know, dressing completely differently. Um, you know, just those are little signs to tell you that things may not be, you know, all peachy, and you might need to, you know, intervene or do a little bit of a deeper dive into kind of what their world is like online. So I'm included for you a list of cyber lingo, different, and this is not an all-inclusive list. I was looking for something. This is one I've used in the past, and I was trying to see if there was something that was more updated and had more information. The, the reality is that this list is, you know, it's a snapshot, but these are some of the more common things that kids may use. So if you're happen to be going through their phone and you're seeing different, you know, abbreviations, this is a non-exhaustive list of what those abbreviations and acronyms mean. I would highly recommend that, you know, you guys, you know, they're easy to find. You can Google them. If you're seeing different abbreviations or acronyms on your kids' phones, then I would take a look and see what they mean. Sometimes they're very harmless, and sometimes they have, you know, malintent. So become an informed consumer. I fully endorse going through your kids' phones. I do it. I did it with mine when they were younger, and you know, it's important to see what they're seeing if you're, you know, if you don't have another way of monitoring them. Okay, so what can parents do? What can you guys do? Encourage your kids to complete their homework in a common area of the house. If they're in the rooms, make sure their doors are open and they can be supervised. So, I mean, and you know, my kids were, I wasn't always great with this either. They would go in their rooms and shut their doors, you know, when they're doing homework. You know, the days of having the family computer in the, you know, in the living room are pretty much over because everybody's got their laptops. But you know, make sure that they're not isolated, and that there doesn't, not that you're sitting over their shoulder, but that they know that there's supervision, and that at any moment you kind of walk in and look over their shoulder and see what they're doing. Kids are really good at hiding things on the computer. They if they only worked as hard doing their work as they do to hide what they're doing, they would be, all of them would be super successful humans. So just let them know that there's no, everything is open and you can go in anytime. You know, I get the argument, or I used to get the argument, like, this is my room, it's my, it's, you know, it's you're invading my privacy. I'm like, do you pay the mortgage? No, I pay the mortgage. So it's my room and I'm allowing you to live there. It's my computer. It's not your computer because you're not an adult yet. So it's my computer that you're allowed to use. So, you know, establishing those boundaries so that they know, and not, and obviously not, you know, overdoing it, not looking at it every day, but let them know that there could be times where you're going to go check their stuff. Sometimes that'll mean that they won't put things that they want on the computer or that'll get them in trouble. Sometimes that means that they'll hide at other places or whatever. But if you have already established that trust, you know, then hopefully those things will be minimal. Know what they're, yeah.
Excuse me,
sure.
Chris.
Uh-huh.
We have a related question.
Sure.
Do you think parental controls on devices are a good idea, or does it just encourage the tech savvy kids to find workarounds and then lie about it?
Well, it's, yes, I think that parental controls are important, and tech savvy kids, if they really want to find a way, they're going to find a way, regardless of whether you put the controls on there or not. So I say put the controls on there and make them work for it, if they're going to try to get away with something. Yeah, so definitely use the parental controls, and then you know, loosen them as kids get older. Like, for an example, when my kids were younger, you know, they all had their iPhones, and I had the parental controls on there that like wouldn't let them go onto certain, you know, websites that or they couldn't download apps that were you know, meant for adults. So, you know, sometimes they're rated by age, so they could download things freely, you know, that were within their age range. If they wanted something, to download an app that was over their age range, they had to get permission from me to do that. Like I would get a text message saying, you know, can your kid download this app? And I would look at it and say yes or no. So I definitely think putting the controls in place is a good thing. And then, you know, then it becomes the game of how do I need to outsmart my kid, or are they really going to work hard to get around stuff? And I think that's just an example of what kids do. We all try to push the boundaries and figure out ways around what mom and dad want us to do. This is just another form of that. So it's a game that's been going on for centuries between kids and parents. So yeah, put them in place and then go from there. Like I said, know their usernames and passwords for all social media accounts. Make sure that they never include any personal information in their profiles. Nothing that can direct people to who they really are or where they live. Go over their, you know, instant message friend list or their Snap friend list, or, you know, Instagram, things like that. Ask who each person is and how they know those people. And like I said before, sometimes it's going to be just for their own following. They may not know 80% of the people that are on there, but the 20% that they do know, figure out who they are and how they're related to, you know, to your kids. Keep yourself updated on the latest acronyms. Like I said, I just Google them if I don't know what it is, but you know, some of them are very cryptic and they can have many meanings. So putting things into context, and then ask your kids too. And if it matches, then great. And if it doesn't, then have a deeper conversation about that. Discuss cyberbullying with your kids and ask if they've ever experienced it or seen it happen to someone. This needs to be an open conversation. And part of the reason that bullying continues is because a lot of kids are ashamed if they're targets of bullying, and they don't want anybody to know. So they don't want to tell mom and dad. And if they are a bully, they're not going to tell you because they are going to keep doing what they're doing. So have that conversation, keep it moving forward, making sure that, you know, that they know that you are not going to let it go. Tell your kids that you're not going to blame them or punish them if they're cyberbullied. Emphasize that you're not going to take away their computer or their phone privileges. This is the main reason that kids don't tell adults when they are cyberbullied. They feel like they're going to get in trouble. I'll never forget, I was doing a presentation at a local school here in Santa Clarita. And after the bully presentation, after the presentation was over, this 6th grade girl came up to me bawling, tears rolling down her. What's the matter? She's like, I'm getting cyberbullied. I'm like, you okay? Like, have you told your mom and dad? She's like, no. And she was, I mean, like shaking. And I'm like, why not? She goes, I'll lose my phone. I'm like, oh no. Where she was more concerned about losing the technology than she was about the torture that she was going through online. And that creates a very, very difficult situation. Kids have to know that there's going to be boundaries set, but they have to know that there's a reason for it, and it's not simply punitive, that there's boundaries. They're going to get their phones back. They may lose it for a bit, but that's okay. That happens in life. We have to have consequences for behavior. But kids need to understand where the line in the sand was. It's really, really important. Now, like I said, that sat with me, it still sits with me, because that presentation was probably, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago. And I mean, that girl's face, it was like talking about cyberbullying had hit everything that she was going through, and it just, she just broke down. We got her the support. We talked to the parents. Things were okay. She moved past it, but it was just the tip of the iceberg for her, and it was all about not losing the phone. That was the most important thing, when that shouldn't have been the most important thing at all. So parents need to be the trusted places that can go when things go wrong, online and offline. And it is crucial that you are there to provide the necessary supports and love. Help them feel secure. So when we talk about the cyberbullying, it is just another form of bullying, and it all comes down to parenting. It all comes down to what happens in the 4 walls that you live in, and how it is that you work with your kids in order to create more actualized humans. So here's some resources for you guys. Those 3 websites are actually really good websites. They have both research on them in addition to supports, how to recognize signs of bullying. The basics, like I said, are any sort of change in behavior, diet, grades, friends, dress. Those are the big things with kids. But those 3 websites have a lot of good information and resources for parents. The 2 on the bottom, Bark and Our Pact, are apps. Those are monitoring apps. So Bark is probably the more popular and the more widely used app, but it is a way of connecting all of your kids' social media to your either computer or phone. And it will allow you to monitor the behavior that happens online to determine whether or not your kids are targets of cyberbullying, or if they are being the cyberbullies themselves. So check those 2 apps out. Those are the websites for the apps. You can read all about them. I believe that there is a cost for both of them. I was not the free ones. I didn't really find a whole lot of free ones. And these, in my research, these 2 kept coming up as the top 2 apps that parents can use to kind of protect their kids. So with that, are there questions from our audience?
Yes.
Okay.
How do you report cyberbullying if you know that your child's experiencing it? Who do you tell?
Well, it's actually a really good question. If it is existing through school, if it's happening through someone that they go to school with, you can alert the school. If it is someone who's not at the school, you can alert the police. It is, like I said, cyberbullying is a crime. It is against the law. And so you can file a report, and the sheriffs can take it from there. but school and sheriffs. Or if you know the parent, if you know the kid and you know the parent, you can try to deal with it that way also.
In general, I know you don't know the rules of every single school out there, but in general, what responsibility does the school have if they are alerted by a parent in this kind of a situation?
So the way that it works in education, this is ed code, is that if there is a problem, a bullying situation, something that happens, you know, that either begins at school and then goes out in, you know, into the community, the school is responsible. They have what's called locus parentis. So anything that begin, like for example, if kids were having, and this is, you know, I'm going to use a physical example. So let's say that a couple of kids there's a bully and a target at a school, and the bully follows the kid home and they end up getting into an altercation before either of them get home. That is technically still the school's jurisdiction. The school is responsible for the behavior of their students, or we call them learners at SCDI, until they are in the care of another adult. So all the way till they get home or till they get to their whatever their next destination, they're handed off to another person. So school has a lot of jurisdiction, believe it or not. And that's, like I said, that's not just, that's California Ed Code.
Great. I didn't see any other questions.
Okay. So if that's it, then that's the kind of the end of the presentation. I want to thank everyone for participating. I really appreciate you know, the opportunity to talk with everyone today. If there are other questions, this is my contact information. Please feel free to reach out, shoot me an email. Email is always the best way to get me. I'm not always at the office. So that's a really good way to connect. All right.
Great.
Thank you guys so much.
Okay.
Phyllis,
Yes.
you're unmuted. We can hear you.
Oh, okay. So I would just like to say, Chris, we thank you so much for sharing all this valuable information with us, and was a great and timely workshop. So next, mark your calendars, because our next Life Forward workshop is currently scheduled for Saturday, January the 29th, of course, from 10 to 11:15 a.m. via Zoom. It will be understanding and filing taxes. Understand the basics, whether you prepare your own or not. Presented by Brian Martin, enrolled agent for Martin and Company, tax and wealth advisors. You will be receiving a flyer and an opportunity to register within the next few days. So thank you everyone for joining us. Be sure to check our website and our Life Forward workshop page. You find previous workshop recordings available for your reviewing, and this workshop will be added to the other recorded workshops. So everyone, have a great day and goodbye.
Thanks.